Hello, it's Danielle, or Darn Pretty Smile, which is my YouTube handle, back with another book report. I decided a few months ago that it'd be fun to share some books that I read as I make my way through my collection of hundreds of books. Figure out what to keep and what will free up space on the book pile. Bookshelves. So my normal rule is that if a book is political or contentious in nature somehow, I'll review it on my private Facebook page only. I'm taking a chance and putting this on YouTube, hoping that people will behave themselves. If you don't like feminism, just move along. No comments needed or any bad behavior. Seriously, we're all human beings with feelings and emotions. If you can't play nice, go play somewhere else. Today's book is Sisterhood is Powerful, an anthology of writings from the women's liberation movement, edited by Robin Morgan, published in 1970. I purchased this paperback for $2 at Half Price Books, and see it costs $50 to $150 on abebooks.com and upwards of $60 on Amazon, so score for me. Sorry that makes it less accessible for anyone interested in it, as usually the books I review are cheaper finds. It took me almost a month to get through this book, but it is a large book. I really enjoyed that it was an anthology because it gave a wider lens to the perspectives of different women at the time. Oftentimes, it would have several different women write on the same thing, so one wouldn't think that one woman spoke for everybody, like lesbians, schoolgirls, black women, latinx women. It even had an essay on the history of women in China, which is, especially since I'd recently watched the movie One Child Nation documentary. I learned interesting facts, such as newspaper classifieds used to be divided by the gender until that was ruled illegal in the 68, I believe, sometime in the 60s. Although this book was released 50 years ago, in what was seen as the second wave of feminism, the first being during, the suffragist movement, the right to vote, I still see a lot of the same disparity that they mention. Unfortunately, it seems like each decade we're chipping away at more inequality, so keep it up. It was really interesting to see the varying levels of intensity and ferociousness that women had during the time period. Included in the back were historical documents like the Scum Manifesto, aka Society for Cutting Up Men, which is pretty extreme, and several statements from witches, which is an acronym for anything from Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell, or Women Infuriated at Taking Care of Hoodlums, or Women Incensed at Telephone Company Harassment, which was a group of women working at Bell Telephone, Women's Independent Taxpayer Consumers and Homemakers, Women Interested in Toppling Consumption Holidays, and my personal favorite, Women Inspired to Commit Herstory. There were articles written by former sex workers, articles about the welfare system and how it's created to restrict women, housework and how that and childbearing is part of the unequal burden that women carry. There were articles written by women in the military, journalism, doctors, women in the male-dominated Catholic Church, and plenty of statistics about abortion, birth control, and income inequality. There was an essay from women taking a karate class with men and how they noticed things about themselves and the atmosphere in the dojo, and how sometimes they had to bring attention to certain inequalities, even though that's not why they were there. So it's about sometimes we have to speak up when things are unjust, even if we don't want to, or, it's not our intent to police other people. There were essays on female sexuality and desegregation. There were poems and songs. There was a little bit of everything in this anthology. I really encourage you to see if there's a copy of this at your local library or for download or interlibrary loan or something, because this book just feels like a link in the chain to the women before us and to the women that follow. Funny I should use a chain metaphor when we're talking about the oppression of half of the world's population. Woo-hoo. Don't be fooled. Many of the women in here are not man-haters, and they do encourage men to acknowledge their position of power and work with women. And there was a really interesting essay about the position of men dominating activist groups at that time and how they would prevent women from leading and more or less use them for sex. How men would basically bring women into a movement or kick them out by betting them, and how this would put other women against each other in radical movements. That just goes to show how human nature and interpersonal relationships are still present in groups that are trying to challenge the status quo and work against injustice. A lot of times they talked about women thinking that, my relationship's good with my husband, so everything's fine, but It's not necessarily a personal thing, it's like a whole spectrum. Of course, there are essays about the media and the marketing of beauty products. There were documents from the people that protested the Miss America pageant, and they said there were no bras burned. That was something created by the media. And why they were protesting the Miss America pageant. Groups that targeted bridal fairs or military draft offices. What I took away from this is that just by being a woman, you are inscripted into a never-ending war to have women and men be on the same playing field, to be judged by the same terms, or get the leg up or resources that are needed in order to be on the same level playing field. And that Black women have always got the hardest battle because they're fighting both racism and sexism, and they are the least well paid in the world. When you look at the different tiers of how much people are made based on their race and their race/ethnicity and their gender, Black women always, they don't get what they deserve, obviously. There are so many areas to focus on, and this book did a great job of giving voice to a lot of different women at that time period. There are so many things that women in 2020 don't even know they take for granted, like being able to own property, open a bank account without a male family member's consent, having a voice in where you and your family should live. Seriously, at one time, men could divorce a woman if she didn't agree to move where he wanted. There are a lot of ridiculous things in our history, and I was glad to go back just 50 years and get a little more knowledge about it. So again, try to hunt down an existing copy of this anthology in a library. This book would be interesting to any person, male or female, that is interested in treatment of women in history and the role of women in the future and what can be done to make that a more beneficial thing for everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Darn Pretty Smile, to be informed of my next book review, or find me at daniellepsmith.com, Danielle P. Smith on Facebook. Thanks. Keep reading.